Hello, mortals. I am the BookTube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And I wanted to do another reaction video, this time on James Tullos, who is a booktuber who's been around for a while. And it's kind of funny because I'm subscribed to him, but it seems like I rarely see his video pop up on my feed for whatever reason. Thank you, YouTube. Anyway, I know he's a popular booktuber, and I want to check his channel out more. I don't know how to describe him, except maybe he was like that guy in high school who's kind of rebellious, kind of irreverent, really smart, maybe had long hair. We all went to school with that guy, right? Okay, let's get started. James Tullos has 113K subscribers, at least at the time of filming this video. And let's see, some of his views. One he just released 5 hours ago already has 4.8K. Previous video has 9.5, 11K, 16, 25K. Oh, these are huge numbers for a booktuber. And actually pretty good numbers for someone with the number of subscribers he has. So let's take a look at the videos. And what I want to do, because I honestly don't know that much about this guy, even though I'm subscribed to him, I always enjoy it when I do play his videos, but I want to go back to the very beginning, as we usually do. So we'll sort from date added, the oldest, and it looks like he's doing single book reviews. We love that. Not that they do well usually, but his first video is 2.4K for a single book review. I wish I got that on my single book reviews, but I guess out of the gate, and this is 4 years ago, that he's got good numbers. So I guess there's just something about his personality that people love. I'm going to assume that this is his first video and he didn't start a channel previously and he's deleted or privated videos. So let's take a look at his first video. I don't know this book, Rot and Ruin.
A lot of people that say that an intro is the most important part of anything, that you should always put the most effort into that.
He looks so young,
in order
oh my
to grab
God.
your audience and keep their attention. Generally that's true, but I'm lazy, so here's Rot and Ruin.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
This is a book that, when you first hear about it, might sound super generic and boring. Like, it's a young adult novel, so obviously that carries its own stigma. There's a lot of tropes and cliches that are very easy to make fun of and that sort of thing. And it's post-apocalyptic, same story, and has zombies in it. So if you're anything like me, you've been completely inundated with just assloads of zombie shows and movies and video games just over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Not that they only appeared 10 years ago, but that they've just blown up like crazy in that time frame.
Okay, let me stop here just to comment. He looks much younger than I thought he, well, obviously this is 4 years ago, so I guess he's in his 20s now. Maybe he was a teenager back then. Quality of the videos are pretty darn poor, not good audio and video quality. I assume this is probably his phone or something. But that said, he has that baritone voice that not many booktubers had, and he has that sense of humor that has you drawn in. He's not smiling very much, so he's not giving me the charisma that I think he's developed over 4 years, but let's keep watching.
So let's just get started on why that's not the case for this one. Now, this book is about a kid named Benny Imura. Now, he lives about 14 years after the zombie apocalypse has already happened. Now, that already sort of sets it apart from most other zombie fiction, I think, because think about it, most of it happens either right as it's happening, or as the apocalypse is happening, or right after the apocalypse happens. You know, there's not many that take place years later after the threat is not gone, but everyone knows about it and knows how to combat it, and they have their own safe little settlements, and they're just going about their daily life. And so the book starts off with Benny Imura being, he's about to turn 15, or he just turned 15, and he needs to get a job, because in their town where you live, you get a certain number of rations up until you're 15, and then if you don't have a job, those get cut in half. So he needs to find something to do. And he looks around for a while, and he just, all the jobs that there are, he just hates. And he has the opportunity to work with his older brother, who is his only family in this, who is a bounty hunter. He goes outside the walls and hunts down zombies. And while that sounds cool as shit to most people, Benny really hates his brother because he feels that his brother let their parents die on the first night when the zombies first appeared.
He needs to pick it up a little.
One thing that bothered me about this book is that Benny is supposedly only a year and a half old, but he can very clearly remember the memory of his mother dying. That's weird, but whatever. It's let's not question the science behind it too much. And eventually Benny obviously relents, and he has to join his brother Tom as a bounty hunter. They go out into the ruins. They discover all kinds of neat stuff. Benny starts hearing about this place called Gameland, which is supposedly zombie pits where they throw in kids and people with no weapons or anything just to see if they survive and gamble on it. And I'm not going to go too much more into that because of spoilers. See, the world building in this is actually quite good. Because, like I said, it's different. It takes place years later instead of right as it's happening. And also, it's just neat to see how people have adapted to living with zombies, you know? Most of the book takes place in and around a town called Mountainside, which is, you know, just a giant...
Okay, I'm going to stop it here, partly because I'm not that interested in this book, but I want to get a feel of more of his books. I think this is leaning towards a good book review. And if you're interested in this, of course, I'll link it below so you can see the full video. And if you want to check out more about Rot and Rune. But let's go ahead and look at more of his channel. Okay, it looks like he's been doing single book reviews starting 4 years ago. And these are really good numbers. Ranging anywhere from, I don't know, 1K to 5K. I mean, for booktube, these are numbers that many of us would be ecstatic about. And it looks like he's pretty eclectic in his choice of books. I see The Fifth Sorceress. I believe I've read that. People of the Wolf. I'm not sure if these are recent releases at the time. I think they probably are, because there's Way of the Kings, which is 3 years ago. Oh, he went through the entire Expanse series. And it looks like a hairy turtle dove. That's a blast from the past. And, of course, Ascension. We have a lot of Brandon... Oh, we did The Black Company! You know I love The Black Company. Okay, let's just take a peek. Let's take a peek, see what he says about The Black Company. I hope this is the original series.
Hi, I'm back again, and now I only have 6 books, so I have a 6-sided die. There will be no free choice this round, and number 1, that is
one way to
Chronicles of the Black Company. And
pick your books.
That one's actually 3 books in one, so I might just read the first one, I might read all 3 and then review them. Who knows? We'll see.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's
better
not too
like
long.
The Black Company.
Okay, just got finished reading the first Black Company book. Like you can see, bookmarks about a third of the way through. And I really only thought that it was okay.
Oh.
But if someone out there told me that they thought it was absolutely amazing, I would totally understand. Now, let me explain.
Now, real quick, my history of The Black Company is I read it when it first came out in the 80s, and it was extremely popular among the Dungeons & Dragons crowd. In fact, I know a couple of game masters who have been inspired by the Black Company books. And they are anti-hero books insofar as there's these bad people, or this bad company of soldiers that are in a realm that's pretty much where everyone is evil and cutthroat and dog eat dog, and they kind of survive. There might be a moral compass among some of them. I hope he goes further in the series, though.
So this book, at the beginning, I didn't like it that much. I thought it was kind of a standard story, and I didn't like the way it was told. Everything was coming at me way too fast. I couldn't really process anything. There wasn't enough information to really understand the world or a lot of the characters in it. But as it went on, and the story got a little bit better, and
just a little bit,
things just started to click into place. And at one point, around 2/3 of the book, I realized why people like this book. I realized what the potential of it is, or what the appeal of it is. This story is kind of standard by fantasy standards. It's, an evil demigod wizard thing is trying to take over the world and spread her evil darkness or whatever. And she has, her loyal minions, she has an army of servants, and there's good guys fighting to stop her. However, the Black Company is working for her. And for a long time, it seems like, okay, they're just heroes for the wrong side. And you kind of buy into that because the main character is a decent enough guy, and the Black Company does have a sense of honor. But after a while, I realized the Black Company aren't heroes for the wrong side. They're the bad guys.
Right.
So it's a standard fantasy story told from the perspective of people who are murdering, raping, pillaging. They're monsters. They're terrible people. They are the bad guys. And so once I realized that, it didn't make me like the book a whole lot more, but it did make me realize, okay, yes, this is why other people would enjoy it. So like I said, this story follows the Black Company. They're a mercenary band who at the beginning are...
Okay, I'm not going to watch this whole video again. I'll link it below if you do, but I want to skip ahead to see if he continued reading the series, because I'd be curious what he thinks after he reads the entire trilogy. Okay, I don't think he went further into the series, which is fine, but interesting. He didn't like the Black Company that much. Okay, he didn't like the Black Company as much as I did, because I like a good anti-hero story, but maybe our tastes don't align, but we seem to be reading a lot of the similar books, so let's continue and see what he's been up to as he's progressed through BookTube, or through the years. The Ember Quartet, did not like that at the end. I liked the first three were okay, first two were okay, and then it went downhill for me. He's reviewing the second one. Let's see, what else? Of course he does Mistborn, of course he does Wheel of Time. Looks like he hit 1K 2 years ago and got 3K views on his 1K sub Q&A. Makes me wonder what I'm doing wrong. Okay, and how to do better reviews, a discussion. That's interesting. Winter War. Yeah, I think he has a very engaging and unique perspective and personality and charisma. I want to get one of his older videos so you can see sort of how the charisma has developed from the first video we saw. The one thing that's always remained and I think is appealing about him is his confidence. He's very confident about his views and opinions. Okay, I see this video that is of interest to me, how Rick Riordan writes perfect kids books, because he's mostly been reviewing, it appears to me, adult books. But let's see what he has to say about Rick Riordan.
Everyone knows what Harry Potter is. It's the
Yes,
best-selling book series of all time with over 450 million copies sold. And it's not hard to see the appeal of it. It's all about a kid who gets to leave behind his shitty, mundane life and go hang out in a magical world where he's one of the most important, coolest, best guys ever, and he gets to fight Wizard Hitler with his friends. It's a good story that can be enjoyed by both kids and adults. I think everyone can agree with me there. The series is made using a formula, one which checks off just about every box necessary to make a nigh-perfect kid's story. It offers escapism and wonder while still being able to deal with real-world issues and themes of growing up. The mass appeal pushes all the right buttons to make it the phenomenon that it is. I think everyone can agree with me there, too. But here's where I might ruffle some feathers. Percy Jackson and the Olympians.
Actually, I would say that the structure, plot-wise, of the early Harry Potter books are more of mysteries. They're very much set up as a mystery, like a Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, Encyclopedia Brown, that type of thing. But the world building and the setting upon it is, which makes it so magical. Now let's see what he says about Percy Jackson.
As well as all its spin-offs, take the Harry Potter formula, which was already great for kids' stories, and perfect it.
Was it a formula?
Consider for a minute the similarities between the two. A young boy grows up as an outcast with a shitty home life. Then one day he discovers that there's a hidden magical world out there that he's a part of. Not only that, but by entering that world he gets to leave his shitty home life and be a very powerful, important person. Then a villain from the past that threatens both the regular and magical worlds comes back and the young boy has to lead the fight against him. The fight takes place over the course of years and the main cast all grows and matures as the series goes on, which causes some darker themes to arise. As much as the characters might try to say that the world is dangerous, there's an obvious wish fulfillment aspect to just about everything that makes you want to be a part of it. Oh yeah, and the protagonist is the subject of a very important prophecy. Now, obviously, Harry Potter didn't invent this formula. The Chronicles of Narnia did the same thing back in 1950. However, Harry Potter leaned hard into the wish fulfillment aspect by diving into the setting much deeper than Narnia did. While Narnia had more of a whimsical fairy tale feeling, Harry Potter's world tried to make it feel like it could actually exist. I don't think I need to explain the plot of Harry Potter to anyone, but I will briefly go over Percy Jackson here. Major spoilers ahead. Percy Jackson is a 12-year-old kid with ADHD and dyslexia who has gotten kicked out of every school he's ever attended due to his various behavior issues. He's raised by his mother, a woman named Sally, and his verbally abusive stepfather, Gabe. His father supposedly died before he was born. One day, during a field trip, one of Percy's teachers is alone with him and turns into a harpy, a creature from Greek mythology. She attacks him and demands to know where he's taken something, but Percy has no clue what she's talking about. He receives a sword from another teacher and kills her. Weeks later, school lets out for the summer and he goes out to a cabin for vacation with his mother. The first night there, they get attacked by a minotaur. During the fighting, Percy's mother is apparently killed before he rips off the minotaur's horn and stabs it with it. It's a really badass scene. He finds his way to a nearby summer camp, called Camp Half-Blood, filled with more Greek mythological monsters and other kids. It turns out Percy is a demigod. His mother was mortal, but his father was a god. They just don't know which one. Percy stays at camp for a few weeks, during which he befriends another demigod named Annabeth, a girl about his age who's much smarter and more knowledgeable about the magical world than he is. Wait, what's that picture of Hermione doing there? After a fight with a hellhound, Poseidon, the god of the ocean, officially claims Percy as his son. This is a big deal because the big three gods, Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades, all made a pact decades earlier to not father any more demigod children. It turns out that Zeus's master lightning bolt was recently stolen, and Poseidon is the prime suspect, which means that now Percy is a suspect too. To prevent an Olympian civil war, Percy is sent on a quest to the underworld to try and retrieve the bolt from Hades, who they think is the real thief. Before the quest, he's gifted with a sword and a pair of flying shoes from another camper named Luke. Percy takes his friends, one of whom is a goofy, well-meaning boy, and the other is a girl much smarter than both of them, on a series of adventures across the United States before they reach the underworld. This is similar to most old Greek myths, where the heroes would go off to accomplish something and then get sidetracked a dozen times before reaching their destination.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I get why you can draw, or how you can draw parallels. I would argue these aren't formulas necessarily, but the structure of the story, Percy Jackson is much more of a hero's journey than Harry Potter is, especially, like I said, the early books, where Harry Potter leaned heavily to the mystery genre, I think.
On one of those side quests, they do a favor for Ares, the god of war, and he gives them a backpack full of supplies as recompense. When they reach the underworld, Percy's flying shoes attempt to drag him off to Tartarus, the deepest part of the underworld. When they meet Hades, he denies taking the bolt, revealing that his Helm of Darkness was stolen too. He tells Percy that he'll return his mother, who he's kept as a hostage, if he gives him the Master Bolt. The bolt suddenly appears in the backpack that Ares gave them, and they flee the underworld. Percy manages to defeat Ares in a duel, and the god returns the helm to Hades. Percy gives the bolt back to Zeus, meets Poseidon for the first time, averts a war, and gets his mother returned home. Everything seems great until he goes back to camp and gets attacked by Luke in the woods. Luke reveals that he was the real thief and that he was working on the orders of Kronos, the father of Zeus who was cast into Tartarus thousands of years earlier. Percy survives and Luke runs off to continue his plan to overthrow the Olympians. Despite having the option to stay at Camp Half-Blood year-round, Percy decides to return home with his mom until the next summer. And that's the end of the first book. The next 4 books in the series deal with the struggle between the gods and the returning Titans led by Kronos. If you've never read Percy Jackson but you know about Harry Potter, the similarities are pretty clear to see. But both the execution of the formulaic parts and the few differences elevate it above Harry Potter. One of the things that helped propel Harry Potter to the ridiculous level of success that it enjoyed was the fact that the books grew up with the readers. The first one had a couple of dark aspects, but was overall lighthearted. Percy Jackson starts off with the protagonist's mother being killed and him being forced to go on a quest to prevent war between literal gods. It's not overly violent or exploitative, it just treats kids as mature enough to handle some darker themes. In fact, at the end of the first book, Percy sends his mother Medusa's severed.
Another sidebar, I saw a talk by Michelle Schusterman, who's a great author tuber if you're into author tubing stuff. And she's written a lot of middle grade books. And when she was talking about Harry Potter, she said the first 3 books are, in her opinion, middle grade. The last 3 books are definitely, in her opinion, young adult, because of the themes of and how they're written, and the sort of middle child book is kind of the bridge that can go either way. Anyway, interesting.
Head, which she uses to turn his stepfather into stone and then sell him to an art collector. That's... holy shit. Imagine if Harry set his Uncle Vernon on fire and sold his ashes to a potion maker. You'd have a different view of the series after that, but you wouldn't really disagree with his actions because he was an abusive pile of garbage. In both cases, things get darker as time goes on, and in both cases, it's successful. Percy Jackson just starts in a darker spot, which made it more appealing to kids like me who liked to think that we were edgy, or kids that were just looking for something different. At the end of The Lightning Thief, Percy learns that an evil force from the past is coming back to destroy both the magical world and the mortal one. The rest of the books all deal with smaller one-off adventures that tie into the fight against that force. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone ends in pretty much the same way, and all the following books also have smaller adventures that tie into the fight against Voldemort. However, it's not immediately obvious that that's what's going on at first. The Chamber of Secrets is all about trying to figure out what's been going on at Hogwarts until the very end when it's revealed that Voldemort is behind everything. The Prisoner of Azkaban is all about a new villain who they think is out to kill Harry until the end when it's revealed that Voldemort is involved. Then Goblet of Fire is all about Harry trying to win the Triwizard Tournament until it turns out that Voldemort is again involved. Now let's compare it to Percy Jackson. In The Sea of Monsters, the tree that protects Camp Half-Blood from monsters is poisoned and he has to go on a quest to retrieve the Golden Fleece to heal it. But Luke and the forces of Kronos are going after it too, hoping to use it to resurrect him. Then, in The Titan's Curse, Kronos kidnaps the goddess Artemis and Percy and company go to rescue her. In both cases, it's immediately obvious that this is all part of something larger, that this isn't just a small quest, and that gives the entire series a more epic tone than Harry Potter, which had to essentially start from scratch every time. Even in the later books, it wasn't always clear-cut how the smaller conflicts tied into the bigger ones. Admittedly, this is a personal preference. I'm a bigger fan of large, overarching stories than bad guys of the week that are fought by the same character cast. And as much as I love the adventures of Harry and company, the early books did give off that feel when I was a kid. The final books in both series has a giant final battle between the forces of good.
Okay, I'm going to stop here because I don't want this video to go on forever. But I think what's really interesting about this is you never see James in this video. This is a very well-edited video that I'm sure took him forever to put together. And it paid off. Look at this, 677,000 views. Okay, so let's jump to the end, to his most recent videos. And at the time I'm recording this, None of You Understand Villains. It's a 12-minute clip, already has 5K views, and at this point it's been 6 hours. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look.
Okay, I know the title of this video is going to seem kind of aggressive, but don't worry. I'm not like calling any particular people out here, and I'm not
Okay, maybe it's the braces, but I actually now have no idea how old he is. I thought he was in his 20s, but now I'm thinking maybe he's still a teenager.
Attacking anyone, or not even really attacking any viewpoints here. I just noticed something.
God, I remember having those rubber bands. I hated them on my braces.
That really irks me, and it's basically that no one seems to understand how villains work, or at least on YouTube and the internet in general, whenever people talk about villains, and if they're doing writing advice like how to write villains, or even if they're just reviewing something and examining how villains work, just anything like that, they never seem to totally understand what they are and what they're supposed to be. And so I'm just doing this video. It'll probably be short, or at least relatively short, about how
I have no idea where he's going.
No one seems to understand that.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
Okay, so before we really get into this, just ask yourself, what is a villain? Like, you know, or an antagonist, if you'd rather. Like, what are they supposed to be? In a story, what role are they supposed to serve? Fundamentally, they are an obstacle. You know, they are there to prevent the hero or the protagonist, you know, whatever term you prefer to use there. They are there to prevent them from reaching their goal, whatever that goal may be. Now, it isn't necessarily a person. You know, a villain can be a person. In fact, I'd say most of the time it's that. There are other types of stories, though. You know, there's the classic man versus man, but there's also stuff like man versus society, or man versus nature, or man versus self, you know, that sort of thing. The point is that the villain is there to make their goal difficult, whether their goal is to become the president, or just survive, or save the world, or something like that. It has to be hard for them to do, otherwise there's no real conflict. So the villain is there to serve as an obstacle to that. Like, you know, if it's a man versus nature story, they get shipwrecked on an island, well, nature is just everything around them and it's trying to kill them. If it's a man versus self story, it could be something like he has a severe drug addiction and he's trying to get better, but it has to be difficult for him to get over that. You know, it can't just be, oh, I don't feel like doing heroin anymore, so I'm going to stop now. Like, that's very boring. You know, there'd be no conflict in that story, and therefore it would be an extremely boring story. Like, it has to be hard.
Yeah, when I think of villains, I think of the story structure of conflict or complication. So what is the complication? What is causing the complication? Which in a lot of stories is the villain, but the complication could come in like sort of outer and inner levels. Like if you're talking about character arcs, the villain or the complication might be the person's shyness, or a person's timidity, or a person's aggressiveness, and they learn through the story how to resolve the complication or the conflict. Just as like a more macro thing might be the dragon or the evil overlord or whatever. Now, in some stories, these are usually tragedies or literary fiction, the resolution is a non-resolution. The resolution could be that there is no resolution, that the villain won, or the inner demons won in the end, and the character has just sort of spun in place. So anyway, boy, that was off topic. I like how he's talking about villains here, not just the evil overlord.
You know, and another a bit more of a flashy example would be in pretty much every shonen battle anime ever made. The hero has crazy powers and is super strong and likes to fight dudes, and then the villains, or rather a succession of villains usually, they have to be as strong or stronger than the heroes, because it has to be difficult for the heroes to fight them and defeat them. You know, like if they were just mooks that got taken out real easy, then
Mooks.
Well, what would be the point in reading? It would be, or watching, whatever. The anime and manga are basically the same thing. Fight me on that. But what would be the point in reading or watching? You know, like the story would have no tension, no real conflict, no real story. And I feel like a lot of this seems basic. You know, it seems like yeah, everyone knows this, but I never seem to hear anybody bring it up. You know, whenever people talk about villains, whether it's talking about this villain that they liked in a review, or whether they're talking about how to write a good villain or anything like that, they always seem to talk about the villain's motivation. You know, how to make them complex and interesting. Now, don't get me wrong, that's obviously still very important.
I know he doesn't want to call anyone out, but I'm kind of curious of what videos he's been watching.
I'm not saying, like, oh, you're all wrong, villain motivation doesn't matter. Like, no, it's not at all what I'm saying. The best villains are both, is the thing. You know, the best villains are complex and have interesting motivations and are also very powerful. Like, probably the best example of this that I can think of from the past couple of years would be Thanos from Avengers Infinity War. Now, the first time we really see Thanos, he has already taken out Thor, who we know is extremely powerful, and then we see him just completely wipe the floor with Hulk, who we know is also extremely powerful. Like, he doesn't even break a sweat when he does it, and he doesn't use any of the Infinity Stones, which we know when he gets those are also very powerful, so he gets stronger and stronger as the movie goes on. And that's the thing, we know right from the beginning, and we continue to know throughout the rest of the film, Thanos is a threat. He is threatening. He is intimidating. And yes, he does have some interesting motivations for doing what he does. I'm not saying that he isn't a kind of a complex character. He's still wrong, obviously. You know, he's still a villain. He's still a bad guy. He's still going out to kill a bunch of people for reasons which don't really make any sense when you actually think about it. But he is an interesting character. He's fun to watch, let's say that. And he has a lot of presence when he's on screen, but none of that would matter in the slightest if he wasn't a threat. You know, if he had just managed to steal the stones, let's say, like he stole them through some clever plan or whatever, and then when he fought the Avengers, they just beat him without any trouble, then, well, he wouldn't work as a villain then. Because that's the thing. Fundamentally speaking, Thanos is an obstacle to the heroes saving the world. And if you really want to get into Infinity War, it's actually...
Okay, I think I see where he's going with this video. Now he's saying, I think that the most important part of a villain are to increase the conflict is to have something worthy to overcome or something hard to overcome. I'm thinking of Sauron in Lord of the Rings, where you don't really get much backstory. There is very little in the actual Lord of the Rings trilogy. Don't get me started on Silmarillion. You might pick up more background there. But in the story itself, he is just this impenetrable monolith of evil that is almost impossible for anyone to overcome. It almost feels like the characters are Don Quixote, tilting at windmills. How can anyone take out Sauron? So yeah, it doesn't matter what the backstory of Sauron was, or any villain, or any obstacle, as long as it's an obstacle, as long as it is worthy for your protagonist to try to overcome. I think that's what he's saying. Maybe I'm totally wrong.
Kind of structured with Thanos as the protagonist, but that's a different discussion, I think. And that's something that I just don't ever hear people talk about, people that like Infinity War, because a lot of people really enjoyed that movie. Even people who aren't super into Marvel movies said, yeah, that one was pretty good. And a big part of the reason for that was because of Thanos, but they barely ever talked about how his threatening aura is what made his complex motivations really work in the story, because other than that, he might have been an interesting character, but he wouldn't have affected the story much. And so basically what I'm getting at is that these are equally important, okay? The villains having complex motivations and interesting motivations and just being interesting characters in their own right, and then on the other hand, they still have to be an obstacle, okay? And that goes for, again, whether it's man versus nature, man versus self, man versus God, whatever it is.
Man versus machine.
It has to be an obstacle. There has to be some threatening aura or an intimidating aura. Like, they have to be able to stop the hero from completing their goal, or at least it has to feel like they might do it. Now, this doesn't have to necessarily be physical power, like even if it's a man versus man story, but they have to have some sort of advantage of some sort. You know, like maybe they're in a position of power, like they're a king or a president or something, and they use that institutional authority to do nasty things. Like Joffrey Baratheon would be a good example of this. Like, is he a particularly smart character? Not really. Is he a particularly tough fighter or anything? Not particularly. But he is king. You know, he is king throughout the story, and he uses that authority and that power to do really unpleasant things to people. And they're
to put it
not
mildly,
completely helpless to fight back against it, but they can't do a whole lot against it at first because, well, he's the king. There's a lot of people that are willing to do what he says, either because he pays them or just because it's the law and they're going along with it or whatever. There's a lot of reasons for it. The point is, he has that institutional power, so even if he is not the most intimidating person on his own, he is still a threat and he is still an obstacle to the heroes. Another fun example would be like Lex Luthor, at least when Lex Luthor is done properly. You know, Superman is a fucking god. You know, there's basically nobody who can fight him toe-to-toe, so there's no one who's really a threat to him. But Lex Luthor is really smart. He can come up with clever strategies, clever plans, invent new technology, all sorts of stuff, which would... that can pose a threat to Superman. I completely forgot words for a second, but I'm not doing more. I got more stuff to film. Let's keep going. And so on and so forth. There's other examples of this, but I don't want to just list those off mindlessly. The point is, those are both very important, and I'm not going to come here and say, like, oh, one is more important than the other. If you have to choose one, then choose this one, because, like, ideally, you should have both. And if you feel like you can only have one and not the other, then you need to fundamentally look back and rewrite some stuff. And all that said, if you can't have either of those, if you cannot make your villain a proper obstacle to the heroes, and you cannot make them complex and interesting in their own way, then at least give them personality. Now, what I mean by this is just make them entertaining to watch, or read, or whatever it is. Like, probably the best example of this would be Profion from the Dungeons & Dragons movie. Like, that's a terrible movie. Profion's not a good villain. You know, the heroes defeat him without too much trouble, really. And he doesn't have any real reasons for wanting power. He's just, yes, I'm an evil dude who wants to take over. But he's by far the best part of the movie. Because Jeremy Irons just has the craziest, most over-the-top performance of him that I think I've ever seen in a villain.
You can run, your ladyship, but you'll never run far enough. Let the blood rain from the sky!
Like, it's genuinely hysterical to watch him throughout the whole movie. It's really, really fun, and I
remember being so disappointed when I saw that movie, but he's right about the Jeremy Irons part. But there are some decent Dungeons & Dragons source material out there that I'm surprised no one's ever developed, like Weiss and Hickman and R.A. Salvatore. It's out there. There's stories out there, but they chose to go that route.
Because of that, he's just the best part of a really terrible movie. I mean, granted, that whole movie is terrible to the point where it's funny, but still, the point is, Jeremy Irons as Profion, even though he's not, like, a good villain, I don't think I could really say, oh yeah, he's interesting or threatening or anything like that, but he's just so much fun to watch, and that's a million times better than apathy or just thinking that, oh, he's fine, I guess, like that. It's a million times better. But, you know, that's about all I have to say. I feel like others have given much more in-depth advice on how to write good villains, because, you know, I mean, that's not what this video is even really about. It's not about, oh, here's how you write proper villains. It's just odd to me how no one ever mentions this aspect to them. Like, you know, make your villains a proper threat, make them an obstacle. Otherwise, all the complex motivations and everything in the world aren't going to matter. And that's about it. Goodbye.
Okay, that was interesting. I wasn't quite sure I understood where he was going with that video, because in the end he said that he wasn't trying to give writing advice. I wonder if he is a writer, if he's doing his own writing, because it feels as though he's doing a lot of thinking about complications, resolutions, villains, obstacles. Maybe that's why he's listening to or reading those types of videos. And of course, I don't disagree with him at all. Of course, the opposite to that is having heroes being too powerful and too perfect. So there really isn't any complication. And I've seen that happen in India books where the author doesn't want to hurt their character. And I guess there's a lot of like wish fulfillment type of character building where the author makes the main character so powerful, so perfect, so wonderful that it's really hard to take any obstacle seriously. Anyway, that is James Tullos. I think he is a great booktuber, and I think he's very insightful, and I think you should subscribe to him if you haven't already. And while you're at it, subscribe to me if you're not subscribed to me, and give this video a thumbs up. And hey, let me know in the comments if there are any other booktubers you want me to react to. Until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.